especially for you first-time moms. If you are here and you are listening and you're following along, just know it's okay to not have all the answers, and it's okay to feel what you are feeling. And you will step into that role of motherhood exactly as you were supposed to. So have faith and a little bit of confidence because it's going to be great. All right. This week's podcast reviewer of the week is C-Gerber. She says, "Thank you. I had an incredible first birth experience. I found your podcast halfway through my first pregnancy and ended up buying your course soon after I listened to many of the birth stories. I ended up having my firstborn daughter after only 7 hours of labor with no pain medication, which is incredible, especially for a first baby. I think that's awesome. It was an intense but amazing experience that I was able to have control of the whole situation. This course helped me take control of my first birth and allowed me to go into my labor confidently. My doctor was blown away at how fast I had my first child, and my nurse was also amazed. I told them about this course I took, and my nurse wanted to know what it was called so she could tell other women about it after witnessing my birth." That is seriously incredible. I think that might be like one of my favorite reviews that I have read recently. Legitimately, like, that makes me so happy that you had such a good experience, so much so that it affected other people around you. Isn't that what it's all about? That's so cool. All right, you guys, let's switch gears. And I know we talk about pregnancy and labor a lot. Let's have a postpartum moment, because I don't know that I've covered this actually on the podcast yet, but postpartum boundaries are a real thing. This is something that I feel like deserves a little bit of conversation. And postpartum is really a time for you to be healing, for mom to be healing, for that bonding to happen between mom, baby, and birth partner. And it's just kind of this like sacred space, whether this is your first or your fifth baby, that you get to enjoy together as a family. And there are some things that make it go well, and there are some things that can make it go less well. So let's talk about setting those boundaries, those safe, comfortable, good boundaries, and how we can do that. The truth is, once we have a baby and we have people over, if we don't have these things in place, it's really easy to just have somebody like kind of come in and not even intentionally or on purpose really overreach in some areas that make us feel uncomfortable and unsettled. And so it's a really good idea, just like I have you guys kind of picture what kind of birth you want. And I say, okay, visualize it from that very first contraction all the way through to when you give birth. And we have that whole visualization exercise that we do. I want you to do the same thing with postpartum, right? So for that birth, who is in the room? What does it look like? What's the feel of the room? Are the lights dim? What's the setup? Like all of that. And it's the same thing with your postpartum. I want you to be thinking about who is in the room. What does it feel like? What are the lights like? Where are things located? Who's helping you? What are you and baby doing? Is somebody holding baby so that you can eat? Are you holding baby and somebody's doing laundry or cooking for you? What does that look like? What does your perfect postpartum look like? Is it quiet? Is it loud? Are people touching your baby? Are they not? Are they bringing you gifts? What does that look like for you? And that'll help you get an idea of boundaries. Now, there's another side of this too, where and just like pregnancy, like we prepare for all these things that we think we're going to desire, or think that we want, or think that we're going to be comfortable with. And then that might change when we're actually giving birth or later in our pregnancy, or we experience something along the way. It's the same with postpartum. You can plan for all of these things and think you're going to be fine with this amount of visitors, or this person visiting, or people touching your baby or not touching your baby. And then postpartum is there and people are in your space and you're like, whoa, wait a second. For example, when I had my first baby, and that was a cesarean birth, and I came back home, it was awesome when people came over, and especially when they brought food. I absolutely loved that. I was not in a place to get up and cook or anything like that. Recovering from abdominal surgery and first baby, like I definitely just needed to chill. But I also, like after, I don't know, a couple weeks, I remember I was like, I need to get out of my house. Like I've been stuck in these, tiny walls, and I am feeling just like so stressed. And so there was like a family event going on where like it was somebody's birthday and people were going to be over. And I was like, oh my gosh, please. Yes, let's go. And I took my baby. And as soon as we walked into that house, there were some people there I didn't know. whatever. But I had this like wave of anxiety where I was like, like people are going to ask to touch my baby, like all this, like I was like, I needed to get out of the house, but this was not it. And I didn't know that until I was in that space. And so I remember like just keeping my baby by me and being really uncomfortable and really like not knowing how to express how I was feeling. Luckily, my husband was great, and I feel like he caught on to some of that, and he was able to visit with his family and stuff, but I just kept my baby right near me, and I really didn't want to pass him around. And so again, you plan as best as you can, and then you adapt as time goes. Now, and it really can be different, like first baby to second baby to third baby, right? Because we get a little bit more comfortable in our skin. We know how, like what we're going to be a little bit more. So what we're going to be comfortable with, what we aren't. We find our mama bear voice, maybe some of you have that already, but you kind of like step into that role a little bit more with each baby. And so especially for you first time moms, if you are here and you are listening and you're following along, just know it's okay to not have all the answers, and it's okay to feel what you are feeling. And you will step into that role of motherhood exactly as you were supposed to. And so have faith and a little bit of confidence because it's going to be great. But when you have a baby, everybody gets so excited and they want to come over and they want to see baby. And hopefully they want to love on you too. But people are going to show up, right? And especially if you tell people you have a baby, people are going to show up. And unless you say maybe, don't show up during this time and this time, or you add some boundaries. And it can be really overwhelming, which sounds maybe a little bit silly. Like when people show up, maybe that doesn't feel like it's normally overwhelming. But when you're like learning to read your baby's cues and you're working on that bonding and stuff, and then somebody else is in your space, I don't know exactly how to describe it other than it just feels a little bit overwhelming. And so we don't want it to feel that way. People that come into your space should be safe and comfortable and protective and that kind of stuff. So setting boundaries and helping communicate, having good communication to get these things set up is really, really important. And it's something that you're going to do with your birth partner. They needed to know your birth plan for pregnancy, they need to know your postpartum plan for when people are coming into the home. And you really want to make sure that they are on your side and supportive of you, especially because it's likely going to involve his family too. And he might be more comfortable with certain things that you might not. And so you guys have to be on the same page. Otherwise, you don't want your relationship to suffer as you are trying to work on this bonding and this new relationship with adding another baby into the home or another person into your family. So make sure that you guys are on the same page. And obviously, if you're listening here, you guys, it's been out for a little bit now, but we have a postpartum course. And so maybe some of you guys jumped in. I know a lot of you jumped in when we did the Mother's Day special and you bundled and all that stuff with the postpartum. If you are in the birth course, there is a link. Once you are within the birth course, it's just right on the right side, or if you're on your phone below the videos that you're watching, and you can just dive into the postpartum course. It's like a really quick add-on. But for those of you that are listening that you're wondering oh yeah, postpartum, because it's so easy for us to get so excited and prepare for pregnancy and birth and then forget about postpartum until you're like, oh shoot, I'm giving birth and I'm not ready for any of this other stuff. Anyways, so if you're interested and you're looking into the course already, just add the postpartum course because it will be peace of mind. And then you can totally prep for the birth. You don't even have to touch postpartum until it's postpartum time. And then you can dive in and it's kind of like a click and go, which just whatever question you have, it's oh, okay, click this, postpartum, this many weeks, question about the baby, and it takes you to where you need to go. But anyways, if you're listening to this and you are still pregnant right now, that is the perfect place to be, because I want you to start thinking now, like I said, about what those early postpartum days are going to be. If you are already postpartum, maybe you've experienced some of this, or maybe you're newly postpartum and you're still wondering, how do I do these boundaries? Stick with me. And if not, maybe you're a little bit more postpartum now, you can go back and say, oh yeah, I wish I would have done that. And so for next baby, we're definitely going to do that. But what are your priorities? If you are giving birth in a hospital setting, are you wanting people to come visit you at the hospital? Are you wanting that to be just you and your birth partner and baby alone time, and people can possibly visit when you guys get home? I know a lot of women like to have, food or whatever brought to the hospital by loving parents or siblings or whatever. And that's great. So like it really is whatever you're comfortable with. The best part about the hospital is if you do not want people in that space, you just ask the nurses to cover for you. And they are so good about it. It's like, oh, she's resting, or oh, she's this. Actually, we're going to do this. No family right now. And so they're like a really good buffer for that. And then you don't have to feel bad. So just be thinking about that. I do feel like postpartum is not a time to spare feelings. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. I'm not saying it's time to ruin relationships either, but you will be so glad, even if you had to have like a tough moment or a tough conversation with somebody that you love dearly. If you are feeling like you don't want them in your space for whatever reason, by saying, I'm sorry, that's not going to work for us right now, or we're not having visitors right now, you will feel better protecting that space in that postpartum period. And there will always be a place and a time for that loving person to have their time with you and with baby. So I think postpartum is just a really special time, and it deserves whatever kind of sacred space you feel is best for you and your family. And trust me, you will not regret doing what you feel is best for you and your family. So if you are someone who shies away from confrontation, which is really, really common and totally fine, setting those boundaries ahead of time and then before you're facing them head on, I think is really, really helpful. And that's where that communication with your birth partner is going to come from. So, and in fact, you can consider having your birth partner handle those conversations for you. Like it's great, especially if it is his family, but even if it's not, they can, just like the nurses get to be your buffer, he gets to be your buffer. Maybe he's the one that doesn't like confrontation, or maybe both of you don't like confrontation, but he's just gonna have to man up, but he should be able to watch over and protect you, right? So in regards to postpartum visitors, I think one thing I recommend, obviously, is we have some great printable PDFs available in the postpartum course, but we also have a delegation list. So I am going to include for you guys, we have like a postpartum, it's like a downloadable kind of, I think we called it a workbook, but that got confusing because people are like, wait, is that the workbook for the course? So that's not what it is, but it's a postpartum download, and it includes a bunch of stuff, one of which is a delegation list, but it's got other stuff in there. So I'll make sure to put it in the show notes, and you guys just go ahead and download that. But delegation list is just what it sounds like. So it's things that people can pick up and do while they're in your space. For some women, that's like, awesome. Yes, please. Somebody do my dishes, clean my laundry, fold my towels, whatever, straighten up the house, vacuum. Do my bathroom. For other women, they're like, I want it done a specific way. It's going to drive me nuts if you touch anything. I'm not going to know where things are. Whatever the case, don't touch. So whatever you're willing to let go of and delegate, put it on the list. And that can include cooking meals or whatever else. And I have had moms who are like, we eat a really specific diet. So like, I didn't want anybody cooking for me. But then I recommended, I'm like, okay, so do you have recipes that you can hand them? And like, you've already like pre-bought the products and it's all ready to go. And like, here's the thing, can you make this meal? And she's like, oh yeah, we could totally do that. And then that takes the pressure off, right? You don't have to cook all of your own meals and you're still getting exactly what you need. So just be creative and find ways that you can get the help that you need. But think of dishes and laundry and taking trash out. And I think we even have a space on there for like running errands, and here's a list for groceries and whatever else that you need. And then it's really smart to just have it like in the eye view, have it by the door or on the fridge or somewhere that like when people come, they spot it. And dad can say like, hey, this is what we're asking people to do. Like, this is what we need help with when you guys are here. If you're willing to just grab something and like help around the house. And honestly, most people want to be helpful in one way or another. Like, yes, they want to see you. Yes, they want to see the baby. But yes, they actually do really want to help you. So allow them to do that. If you decide that you don't want anybody else holding your baby, I know that is a big thing. And I feel like 2020 kind of really heightened some senses and some awareness about that. If you don't want people holding your baby, then you say, I'm so sorry. You can look at them and like, but in this early stage, and we're just really trying to be healthy and we love you so much, but we're just, for my for my well-being, I'm not comfortable right now. It's making me a little bit anxious to have other people hold him. So please just know that we won't be doing that for X amount of times or whatever, but you get to choose. So you do not have to hand your baby to anybody. And especially if you know you've got somebody that's going to push those boundaries, just don't even test it. Don't test it because it's just going to stress you out. Especially when you're like, okay, like you can hold them, but we're not doing any kissing and stuff like that. And you have somebody that's like, oh, I just can't help it. I'm so sorry. And you're like, your eyes are bugging out of your head and you're like, I think I might kill this person in my house right now. Don't put yourself in that situation. If you are worried at all that somebody is going to test those boundaries, just don't even bother. It's not worth it. And sometimes when we have family members or friends who are holding the baby and the baby starts crying, and sometimes that can be really stressful for mom to they're trying to shush the baby or whatever instead of like, hey, do you want your baby back? For some moms, they're going to be like, oh, please, yes, bounce the baby. They've been crying for however long and bounce them in the other room, and for other moms, it's going to be like this panic of why is my baby crying and they need to be next to me and whatever else. So make sure that whoever you hand your baby to is eagerly and gratefully willing to hand them back easily. You don't want to have to worry about anything like that, which it's so weird that we have to have these conversations, but these are actual situations that moms come up against. So be aware of that. But don't be afraid to ask for your baby back and hand them off. Anyways, when you are ready for visitors to leave, tell them. Let people know even before they come, like, hey, I'm not quite sure how long I am going to be cool with people visiting. We'll just play it by ear. And even saying something like, hey, I think we're going to nap now, or you and your husband or your birth partner have kind of like a code word or code saying or something like that. Or, I'm really tired. I think I'd just like to rest, something. And that people are like, yeah, okay, of course, love you and we'll see you later and let us know if you need anything. Those are the people that you need around you right now. All right. Another thing that we need to discuss is birth partner's role, right? So I've given you a couple of ideas of what they can do and the ways of communicating with you and then communicating with other people, kind of standing as your rock in that place to kind of protect you and all of that kind of stuff. Another one is just making sure that you discuss those postpartum roles with your birth partner. So it's easy to assume, and it's so funny because I was just talking, I think I was talking with my girls today about this, but how when you are, especially newly married-ish or first baby for sure, and my husband and I, for example, we didn't take time and discuss roles. Okay, when the baby's born, this is what I think you're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And what do you think I'm going to do? And what are you going to do? We didn't have any of those kinds of discussions. And I don't think that that's something that you just naturally think of if you're not listening to a podcast that maybe brings it up. But it was interesting as time went on that I was in my head, I'm like, well, he should be doing this and he should be doing this. And why isn't he doing that? And I'm sure he had, some different thoughts about maybe what I was doing as well. But none of that was being said out loud. And so it wasn't helpful. It's you got to be able to have those conversations so that it's hey, when I'm taking all the time doing this with baby or whatever else, this is really what I need from you or whatever. So it is really important to have that conversation early and before baby is born, and to understand that that's kind of a fluid thing, because as time goes on, those roles can change a little bit, or you kind of get in your groove and dad know what to do and mom knows what to do. And also baby will in the early beginnings of postpartum, it's mom and baby are kind of inseparable, right? Because baby's nursing all the time. Mom and baby are napping together. There's lots of diapers happening, just that bonding and stuff that's happening. And then as time goes on, it's okay, I'm getting longer stretches. Will you watch the baby while I sleep right now? Or maybe you want to sleep with your baby or whatever. Or I'm going to go to the store. Here's the baby because I have a couple hours before they need to eat this time. And it didn't take them an hour to eat. And then I have to feed them again in an hour. It changes as time goes on. And so your roles are going to change a little bit too. And what you expect of each other is going to change. So just keep that communication going and understand that you're going to plan the best that you can. And the best thing that you can do is at least to try to be on the same page and discuss that with each other, but understand that it will change as time goes on. I think it's especially when we're talking about breastfeeding and things, when we're talking about what dad can do, it's really easy. I think it's easy for dads to feel I don't know what to do. And baby's crying or baby's this or baby, they must need to eat here, And that can feel overwhelming to mom. And also just because mom is breastfeeding and she has that source of comfort does not mean that there's nothing that dad can be doing. And so if you are a breastfeeding mom, there are certainly other things that dad can do, right? Like if you're getting up in the middle of the night, it's like he can grab you things that you need. Now, hopefully you've got some kind of like either your nightstand is full of all the things you need or you have a little breastfeeding cart or whatever so that you've got what you need nearby. But sometimes it's nice to just feel like you're not in it alone. Like I wish one of the things I would have said, and like, yes, I know he needed to work, but like, will you just be up with me sometimes during the night while I'm breastfeeding so I don't feel like I'm doing it alone? Like that would have been helpful. And I know for babies who are formula fed, like it's much easier to get dad involved, at least with like the feeding process. Cause you're like, okay, you take this shift, I'll take the next one or whatever, because he can handle my bottle. But for breastfeeding moms, it's like you're on every single time. So like maybe you nurse and then, maybe you get to get up and go to the bathroom while dad burps the baby and changes the diaper or, grabs you whatever you need for water or refilling your snacks or whatever. And maybe it doesn't happen all the time in the middle of the night. Maybe dad does have to work and whatever you guys work out, but it is important to involve each other. And I feel like you're doing it together, just like pregnancy, right? Like when you're preparing for your birth, it's like have dad listen to the podcast, have him read the books, have him, be involved with the process of it. It's the same thing. You guys, you just want to feel like you're in it together because you are. So I think too, like we had said, like delegating household chores and stuff, that was something that I think would have been so helpful for us to discuss early on. But like, while I'm relaxing and being with the baby, like really in those early days, like mom should just be able to be with the baby unless you're like, I need to get out of the bed or, off the couch, or I need to just like move around and I want to vacuum or I'd like to make dinner or like I just need to be doing something else. But if the desire is I just need to be here snuggling my baby and recovering and resting, then there needs to be some like, and because of that, these things need to get done. And if dad either doesn't have time for those, or he's like, I want to be spending time with you guys too, and I don't want to have to worry about all these things, that's when we bring in the extra help. And that can even come in the way of a postpartum doula. So if you haven't heard of a postpartum doula before, that's totally something to look into. This is somebody who can come, they can come, all times, day or night. It is someone that you would interview just like a pregnancy labor doula. And they are specialized in newborns and newborn responses and in moms and mothering and whatever else. They can watch the baby while you sleep. They can fold towels and cook and, whatever you need them to do so that you're able to focus on your family. And that's especially helpful if you are a family that doesn't have other family nearby or other family that you want helping, even if you do have them nearby. This can be somebody that can come in and be helpful with all of that kind of stuff. So think about vacuuming and chores and bathrooms and, everything that needs to happen in a home and make sure that you guys have that discussion. I think emotions are high and mom is very vulnerable postpartum. And so mom's mental and emotional well-being is really crucial during this time. I know like within the birth course, we say, here are some signs of postpartum mood disorder. So that's anxiety and depression and OCD and anger and these other things that come up. And it's like, here's a printout, paste it on the freezer or the fridge so that you can kind of just glance at it occasionally, because when you're in the thick of it, sometimes it's like, this is just, she has a new baby and whatever else. I'm talking to the partner, right? I'm like being the partner, like, it's overwhelming and we're tired and this, but you partners, mom best. And so if you have something like that you can like reference that says like, it's like all of a sudden she's checking some boxes where it's like, okay, yes, having a newborn is difficult. Not getting sleep is difficult. Breastfeeding is difficult. But I'm noticing some of these other things that are a little extra and don't remind me necessarily of her and who she is, then it is helpful to have some things like that. Like your birth partner can be kind of that first person that recognizes that something is off. Now, how you approach that in talking to your wife or the mother of your baby about how you're feeling about noticing some of these things, that can be a little bit tricky. So make sure that good communication and loving and all of that kind of stuff. But those things can certainly happen postpartum, right? We've got our kind of like those couple of weeks after we have our baby and we have this big drop in some of these hormones and mom can experience baby blues. But after those couple of weeks and we're pushing into week 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and more, then we're looking at some different like some different issues. And that's what we want to make sure, is mom eating healthy? Is she still getting high protein? Is she drinking enough water? Is she walking and getting outside every day, especially in the sun? Is she doing those things to care for herself? Is she, how is her sleep and on all of that kind of stuff? And her like physical body, like how's her bleeding and all of that. Again, that's I could go pretty deep, but I'm not going to in this episode. But in other words, there are a lot of things going on with mom, and it is really, really important for dad to be aware of these. Now, the other side of this is realizing that this is a whole new experience for dad too. Now, something that my husband talks about within the birth course, and he has talked about it on the podcast, is, and he didn't talk to me about this until we were recording. I think it was re-recording a podcast, and it kind of came up. He experienced postpartum depression, and that is a real thing. And that is something that I was like, oh, like I didn't even think to look for it or pay attention to it. Like I was so overwhelmed or just focused on myself and the baby and like trying to survive. I didn't even think about that. But if you think about, new fathers or not, whether it's the first baby or the fifth baby, and you think about fathers who are trying to provide for a family, see this new little life and this mother of this baby that they love and wanting to make sure that they're okay. Like they take on a lot and they do it differently than women do. And so a lot of times it goes unnoticed and undiagnosed. And so it is very important for dad to know the signs for mom, and especially in those early weeks. It is equally important for mom to be aware of where dad is at, and being able to have those conversations with him. And that, I think, as a mother now, I'm like, I hope I'm in tune with that for when my kids are having babies, that when I visit postpartum, I'm not just checking on mom, that I'm checking on my boys too. And like, hey, like, how are you doing? What do you need right now? Because guys take it and they take on a lot and they don't necessarily show it the way that women do. So be aware of that it absolutely affects both parties, and you guys are in this together. Like this is a beautiful, wonderful, life-changing thing that happens every time we bring a baby into the world. And it changes us in all kinds of ways, for good and for bad. So I'm working through that together, right? Like every challenge you overcome together, you're going to be that much stronger from it and grateful for it. But when you're going through it, it can be tricky. And so you want to make sure that you have the right support from each other and for each other. The main takeaway, I think, that I wanted you guys to take from this conversation is it's 100% okay to communicate your desires and to have a plan for that postpartum period. Because if you don't, or you're lenient on some of these things, it can actually lead to a harder postpartum and even some regret sometime where you're like, man, I wish I just wouldn't have invited that person over or allowed them to kind of be in my space. And some people are a little bit more pushy than others. I know I certainly hear stories. Now I have wonderful parents and wonderful in-laws. So I want to mention that here, but oftentimes it is the people close to us that kind of push those boundaries. And so it's just so important. Like you don't want to look back and be like, dang it, like that really affected the way that I was able to bond with my baby or my husband or whatever the situation. Like we really shouldn't have had that person come stay with us for 6 weeks postpartum just because we needed the help, like I wish I would have thought about that before. That's the kind of stuff that I hope this episode does for you guys. But I want to give you permission to not feel guilty about any of the decisions that you're making. This goes the same. Like I know it's a postpartum episode, but if you're here, you're probably pregnant, or newly postpartum. But if you are pregnant, it's the same thing for who you're going to allow into your birth space. You don't have to feel guilty about saying like, sorry, mom, like I love you, but I know you're going to stress and be worried about things that it's going to distract me. Like I just need you. I will call you when it is over, and that was me. And I love my mom, but I've said like, there is a picture when I was having my baby at home of me texting my mom, like the last text she got, like, I love you. I'm in labor. I'll let you know when it's done. And I turned my phone off. It wasn't like so feel free to check on me in a couple of hours or call my phone a million times, and then my husband took all the calls and the texts and whatever on his phone. But I was like, that's that. So it's okay to put those boundaries in. If it helps you practicing these things in the mirror, and I don't care how stupid it sounds, I don't care how silly it feels, you get it down until you feel comfortable saying it out loud. You practice in the mirror, you practice to yourself, then you practice with your spouse or your birth partner, and then you move on to the person that it needs to be said to, or even a friend, and then you move on to the person. But practice, practice, practice. And I think over time you're going to feel more and more comfortable and confident. And like I said, with every baby, you'll get your voice a little bit more. My goal is that you get it with the first one. But if you're listening to this and you're like, I didn't do that so good with my first baby, and you're pregnant with your next one, do it right with this one. Like that, every opportunity is a learning experience. So I hope that you'll do that. But overall, be patient with yourself. Don't feel guilty and about putting your family's needs first, and enjoy your postpartum period, because that's what it's there for.